Hey everybody, tonight we're debating Me Too on trial, and we are starting right now with Kay's opening statement defending Me Too. Thanks for being with us, Kay. The floor is all yours.
Thanks, James. Again, thank you for having me on. I'm not going to take up too much time in my opening statement. I never do. I am a huge supporter of the Me Too movement. I think that even though all political and social movements, they do have their issues. They do attract bad faith characters that misuse the platform and the message that we're trying to get out with a specific movement. But I don't think that we should instantly trash the entire Me Too movement. I think that a lot of great things have happened with the Me Too movement. And overall, I think I'm a big supporter of it. I think that there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of push out the bad faith actors to kind of remove the negative things that have come out of Me Too, and to make this into the movement that it was originally meant to be.
You got it. We will kick it over to Stephen.
Yeah. I obviously 100% agree with everything that Kay had said. It's very easy to not sexually assault someone. Just watch. Nailed it. The point that all of us should have arrived at by now is that this shit is just horrifically common, and that's just there in the stats. 1 in 10 men will commit a sexual offense in their lives, and that is just abhorrent. Somehow not everyone agrees with this sentiment. I genuinely don't understand why. There was 80 women came forward about Harvey Weinstein, 60 women came forward about Bill Cosby, and still to this day, people will look at that and say, well, I guess we'll never know what happened. And it's just like, well, fucking hell, I bet you were shite at Cluedo. If 60 women accused me of sexual assault, I'd think I'd done it. There was this other thing of like some men felt attacked by the Me Too movement, which is an incredibly interesting stance to take. If we imagine that this wasn't a rule, and tomorrow the president of every country came out and said, right, from now on, there's no more pig fucking, okay? Can't fuck pigs anymore, can't do it, right? It's just not allowed. And 98% of the world was like, well, yeah, okay, obviously, and just went on with their day. But those other small, very small group of people were like, well, hang on here now. I feel attacked by this. My question to both of those groups is the exact same, which is, what have you done? There's no shame in double checking your past sexual history. It's the first thing that I did, and then when I discovered that I was all in the clear, I decided to assist the movement. However, some men, not all, have decided to change the narrative around the Me Too movement. They're doing this in a very effective way. It's via deflection. They're bringing up things that, while relevant, are not necessary to the conversation as a whole. They will say things like, oh, yes, well, what about men who get raped? Yes, they do. By men. 84% of male sexual assault survivors were sexually assaulted by men. Or things like, oh, well, what about the false allegations? Well, less than 1% of rape allegations are ever false. Or things like, well, it's a witch hunt. Well, it's not, mainly because witches didn't exist. It's not like in 50 years' time we're going to find out that rapists were also mythical creatures. We won't decide to glorify them in the same way that we have glorified like zombies or like ghosts or ghouls or any of these things. 50 years from now, you're not going to find little kids dressed up on Halloween as R. Kelly. As I mentioned in the last debate, I'm massively in favor of expanding and have sex ed much more compulsory and to be like a broader amount of details given to that. So just for example, the sex ed that you're given is, the least amount possible information. And, it's just kind of told just barely enough when it's just not. They don't teach you about correct use of condoms, just for example. If I had just one personal gripe that I would love to give about the, sex ed like that we're given, just tell me where the fucking clit is. I'm going to Google it anyway. Or if they do mention this, ironically, they brush over it. This is not an attack on men. It's not even pandering to women. I take this position because to cut a very, very, very long and painful story very short, my friend was raped by an ex-friend of mine from 2 different friend groups. So you don't really get to tell me that this shit doesn't affect me, because it fucking does. We can all do better. We can all be better. It sounds difficult, I know, but I know that we can do it because I know how I failed at it. Because looking back on, his behavior, on his attitudes, on his problematic attitudes and behaviors towards women, did I, looking back on that, did I recognize that behavior and just didn't do anything about it? The answer is yes. And then he raped my friend, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life. It can be done. And whilst not perfect, although I challenge you to come up with any organization that is perfect, I think the Me Too movement is a massive step in the right direction. That's the end of my time.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. We hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you are from. And with that, we will kick it over to Kendon and Arena. Thanks for being with us. They are, you could say, the opposing team. Kendon, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, James, and welcome to everyone who's watching this. Yes, I am Kendon Farr. I am TikTok famous, which is what, Stephen?
The worst kind of famous.
Thank you, Stephen. Love you. Right, okay, so yes, we're technically the opposing team, although I think we ought to establish what we are opposing and what we're not opposing. So we're not debating whether sexual assault is a thing. We're not whether it's an epidemic. We're not debating whether it should be punished. We're not debating whether, people are victims are lying or not, or we're not even going to suggest that there are no legal failings in the system. As someone who has been sexually assaulted 3 times by men, twice by women, and has been physically abused, I feel some kind of involvement in this movement. However, I think that unlike Kay and Stephen, we must debate 2 points: the efficacy of the movement and its ulterior motives, which is a bit of a suspicious, sounds a bit conspiratorial, but bear with me. So the Me Too movement was obviously born in the wake of, well, first of all, the election of Donald Trump in 2016, where he had made comments about groping women by the groin, a more colourful language than that. Also, the stories about Harvey Weinstein, a notorious sexual predator, a sexual psychopath, if we're being honest, here in the Hollywood system. It opened a conversation and it stimulated a constructive cultural response. So in the beginning, it sounded good. It was a good idea to move forward. However, I believe that the hashtag movement has been co-opted, coordinated, or even corrupted by political agitators who want to not just question the sexual politics between men and women, but also the way that Western cultures govern themselves and people in those societies govern themselves. So, for example, I've read a collection of essays about the Me Too movement in preparation for this debate. A chap called Paul M. Salmon, who writes for one of these weird internet feminist left-wing magazines that only about 5 people read, was talking about Harvey Weinstein and suggested that the entire capitalist structure, especially corporate capitalism in America, but capitalism in general, ought to be deconstructed, rebuilt to prevent powerful monoliths like Harvey Weinstein from being able to do whatever they want for decades. Closer to home in the UK, Sarah Pascoe, a British comedian, suggested that we should lower the evidentiary standard in cases of rape and sexual assault. In other words, a woman's testimony should be more valuable in the court case than any physical evidence. But that, of course, pecking on something that Stephen mentioned in his opening remarks, that does create effectively a witch trial, because effectively, like the witch trials of Salem, Massachusetts, accusation was enough. There was no physical evidence because, as he pointed out, witches don't exist. So it was the accusation was enough to destroy people's careers. And people have been destroyed by accusations. Trial by Twitter has replaced trial by jury. If you don't believe that that's true, there are a few examples. Let's be conservative about this. A few examples of people who have been destroyed, have had their lives ruined because someone's accused them on Twitter. There's been a gang of people mobbing them, and they've lost jobs and positions. If you don't believe that can have an unpredictable impact, just ask Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp is the latest famous victim of this sort of thing. I think it's become pathological. It's now exposed a fear of male sexuality and male sexual expression. So now men don't actually, certainly the men I talk to don't know what appropriate conduct is anymore. And so there's an ironic return to a kind of pre-feminist courting ritual, courting rules. It's weird. It's almost like the feminist movement is regressing. It's abandoning freedoms and all this sort of thing and going backwards. Again, I'm sure people are going to debate that point. So in conclusion, sorry, I've been rambling on for a bit. Sexual assault is real. It's a problem. We must deal with it. The Me Too movement, initially a good idea, and I'm sure most people who use the hashtag are sincere in trying to solve the problem. But I believe, perhaps erroneously, that it creates more problems than it solves. Those are the end of my remarks. I now pass over to Irina.
Thanks, Kendon. I definitely think that one of the main points that I want to hit is something that you had said a little bit earlier, where you had said it's become trial by Twitter and not trial by jury. I think that the Me Too movement in itself was a movement that was good to promote awareness. However, it became something that worked really closely with cancel culture and something that worked in pretty much only social media sectors. So it created almost a situation where people could go online and say, I was attacked and I had all of these things happen to me, and people would explode about it in anger for about 24 hours, but nothing ever came out of it because people weren't going to the police and making police reports. Instead, they were making reports on Twitter. And the thing about Twitter itself and those stories is that they're really hard to look into. When you just see a Twitter post about something that happened, or when someone's accusing someone like that on such a big platform, it's really hard for them to defend themselves or even ever get that assaulter or assailant tag away from the name. Sexual harassment is a really harmful thing, but sometimes the actual harasser isn't a deliberate aggressor. They're actually a clueless participant in this stuff, and their behavior may have had a positive intent, but the effect of their behavior is actually a negative situation. And in social media, there's a very fine line between inappropriate comments, sexual assault, and things that just make people uncomfortable. And depending on how that's portrayed to the world, it can have an effect on someone's life and really, affect how they move forward in their future. The world responds to the idea of sexual assault, especially online and in a social media sector, with the almost entirely as a whole. No one says, oh, you groped somebody, so you should be held, less accountable. Everyone should be held accountable for their actions. And it's essential to get to that heart of the matter, the actual behavior that happened, the actual information, and allow a group of unbiased people to really look at that information instead of just having biased stories back and forth on social media and just getting that out there. I also think that it can create a net loss in the American competitiveness and the actual achievement that we create as a whole, because it can prevent institutions from really trying to hire people who are seriously about have their qualifications. It raises sexual harassment, abuse, and all of those awareness for both men and women. But it is really predominantly used by women. And I don't think that I personally have ever heard of a Me Too movement off the top of my head or a Me Too message that was created by a man. I think that because of this Me Too movement, we're moving towards a place, and not just the Me Too movement, but cancel culture as a whole, that mainstream institutions are going to try and hire, promote, or compensate people based on their gender and race, with the exception of actual, what's the word I'm looking for? With the
ability.
Instead of looking at the actual qualifications is what I'm thinking about. There are, diversity quotas that you have to meet, and gender quotas. And that's starting to push a little bit more into moving I think I think males and white males in particular have a very high bar in order to progress their careers without oppression. And I think that this actual movement creates not an extinction of prejudice, but a shift in the target. And instead of, looking into oppressing minorities, we're trying to move that oppression to another group instead of actually just eradicating that oppression in general. I think that's what I got for you now.
You got it. Thank you very much, Arena and Kendon as well. Want to let you know, folks, we have many more juicy debates coming up. For example, on the bottom right of your screen, this Monday, Arden of Eden returns, taking on Alex Stein on the topic of whether or not trans children should be able to use puberty blockers. So if you like juicy, controversial debates, if you're sick like us, hit that subscribe button as we have many more coming up in the future. And with that, we're going to jump into open conversation. Thanks all for being with us. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, so okay. So Kendon, yeah, I would just kind of start off by saying that, yeah, I do agree that it is true that people have been ruined by accusations. That's 100% true. I had said that, it's less than 1%. That's not my way of kind of wafting it away. However, it's, I just kind of think that this kind of problem seems bigger than what it actually is. And again, that's not my way of wafting away that issue, because it is a genuine, real issue that we need to tackle and something needs to be done about. But it was kind of something that I had gotten from Arenas as well. Do either of you kind of disagree with the Believe All Women slogan, I guess is what it is?
It depends on what. This is a weird one. I've seen the hashtag Believe All Women. The problem with Believe All Women is it implies that all women, as in all 3.5 billion of them, are trustworthy. What you do is you listen to women, you take down their stories, you deal with the stories by, say, I'm a police officer, I'm recording your story. Say, I'm going to pick on Kay because she's there. Kay comes to me with a story. I'm a police officer. I record her story in good faith. I treat it with the respect the story deserves. I follow it to an actual conclusion. If I can bring someone in for questioning, that's great. But ultimately, the idea of believe all women is well, let's flip the genders. Why can't you say believe all men? It doesn't really work, because we know that some men are liars, some men are deceitful. So the hashtag, I understand the spirit of the hashtag. The idea is that, women feel that when they go to the police with their problems, with their stories, that they're not taken seriously, that the cases aren't handled properly or handled thoroughly, shall we say. And that is definitely a legal failing, and we need to address that. But the solution isn't to assume that every single woman who ever comes forward with a story, whether it's about sexual assault or she met a celebrity on the street or whatever, is telling the truth, because that's not quite what you do in a legal system. You make room for reasonable doubt, and that's not what the hashtag Believe All Women implies. It says that we have to believe everything that they say all the time, which is ludicrous. So it depends on what you mean by hashtag Believe All Women. To be honest, I can't give you a straight answer to that question realistically.
See, I think the hashtag Believe All Women itself is just a horrible idea. Like, it's a horrible way to try and raise awareness or even push a claim for sexual harassment. We look at Amber Heard right now. That's in the news. She was on the phone saying, I hit you, and they will still blame you. Like, you will still get in trouble for this. And he did. His life is ruined for it. Like, we don't need a hashtag for Believe All Women. We already have women who are liars, men who are liars. We know people are liars at this point now. I think that we've passed a point where we can just decide that it's time to believe 50% of the country blindly.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing is that the thing is as well. What annoys me when stories like the Depp Heard saga, when that makes interest, what annoys me more than anything else is that it makes other women's testimonies less believable, because it makes, if you've only ever heard stories of, because obviously a lot of women keep these stories quiet, and I understand why they keep it quiet, and I understand it's not entirely their fault. But if you've only ever heard stories in the press where a woman accuses a man and it turns out the woman is lying, that poisons the conversation you have with other women, because you bring that to, well, yeah, but there was this story in the press of like Amber Heard dating Johnny Depp and she blamed him for X, Y, and Z and the other thing, and it was wrong. And so in actual fact, that's what annoys me more. Is like, I also want, Arena and I clearly understand that sexual assault is wrong, but the way that the Me Too movement, the hashtag and all the rest of it, the common people have used it, has completely mangled the conversation. And that's the big problem, as least as far as I see it.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, like, before we go on, the original like slogan, the original hashtag and everything wasn't believe all women. It was simply believe women. The idea that the original slogan was believe all women, and therefore like this idea was painted. It was really a conservative right-wing thing here in the States to say that, you know, believe all women meant that automatically we should believe every story that a woman brings forward about sexual assault, harassment, rape, etc., and socially crucify whoever it is that she's accusing. Whereas originally, the slogan of believe women was simply what Kendon was saying earlier. You know, it was just whenever a woman comes forward, they want police to take it seriously. They want it to go through the justice system, through the proper channels that it needs to go through. They want the support on a social level. That doesn't mean that you need to completely alienate the person that she's accusing, but more often than not, before the Me Too movement really, really blew up, whenever women would come forward, particularly in more conservative groups, I grew up very conservative. Whenever women would come forward with their stories about being sexually harassed or being sexually assaulted or even being raped, more often not on a social level, she was met with criticism more than acceptance. And, you know, we want to support you. We want to help you get through all of the legal processes that you need to go through in order to get justice if it is true what you're saying is true. So the conversation about believe all women, I don't think that it's productive, because the original slogan, what like brought to you by the Me Too movement, wasn't believe all women. It was simply believe women.
Well, I've got a question. So, like, why would it not just be believe victims? Like, because I would assume, and you know, I don't have any statistics on me, and obviously I'm not a male, but men who are abused, especially by other men, and especially in conservative areas, and not even in conservative areas, but in areas that, you know, it's more poor and it's more, you know, it's not okay for, you know, you to have been abused by a male. Those are people who aren't going to go to the police, who aren't going to, you know, and if they do go to the police, they might not get believed either. And these are men who are getting pushed farther into the background, because it's time to believe women, because women need to go talk. Everyone needs to go talk. Everyone needs to go to the police and not be on Twitter about it.
No, and I absolutely agree. And I think that was a legitimate criticism that a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum had whenever Me Too really, really blew up. A lot of people don't know that the Me Too movement has been around since 2006. It was founded in 2006, but it really, really exploded in 2017 with the Harvey Weinstein investigation. But whenever it was founded in 2006, it was not biased either way towards either of the sexes. It was meant to be inclusive. It was meant to simply bring awareness about the pervasiveness regarding sexual assault, particularly in the United States. Whenever the whole Harvey Weinstein thing kind of exploded and Me Too was just absolutely everywhere, and social media really picked it up and ran with it, it more became about women, probably really because of the conversations that were being had during that trial. You had a lot of right wing political pundits talking about, well, you know, if a woman goes to a man's hotel room in the middle of the night, what can she expect? And there was a lot of victim blaming, and that caused the conversation to move less into a discussion about sexual assault survivors as a whole and more about how women experience sexual assault. And I do believe, you know, this is what I was talking about in my opening statement, that we really do need to try to shift the conversation back to what it was originally meant to be, which is a conversation about sexual assault. And that it has no bias against either of the sexes, any gender identity. If you've been sexually assaulted, if you are a survivor of sexual assault, then you need to you need to be believed, you need to be supported, and we need to have an environment where you feel safe to come forward with your story and you feel safe to go to the authorities and get the justice that you deserve.
I'd like to respond to Kay, if I may, unless anybody else wants to jump in with a point. No, okay.
Well, I mean, the only other thing that I had was, I mean, like, so in response to this thing of like, so you're kind of saying essentially, you know, don't necessarily believe all women when they cry rape. I mean, okay, so do we believe all women when they cry burglary, when they cry assault, when they cry mug? What's the standard? What's the difference, right? Because they're all crimes. So if you believe all women, if they go to the police and they say, I was mugged at this place at this time, you know, et cetera, why is it that we all collectively are far more likely to believe that person who goes about that particular crime, but we're not when it comes to a sexual assault? That's and I'm genuinely asking that. That's just because that's just very confusing to me.
But Stephen, you're presuming that I would believe everybody who came forward with a story of a burglary, a mugging, or you know something. But I don't, because I understand that people lie about, all people, men and women, lie about anything for all sorts of reasons. You know that you don't it's. Obviously, we're talking about the legal system. I'm not qualified. My sister is, but I'm not qualified to talk about law. You have to maintain a level of objectivity as much as humanly possible. So if someone walks into a police station to report a crime, you take their story seriously, you ask them questions, open questions to get detail, and then ultimately you take that story and move it forward. Now, obviously, if the story is riddled with holes or contradictions, or they don't give you a lot of detail to work with, then you can't do much with that story. But the implication, whether it's believe women, believe all rodents, doesn't matter, the implication is that when a woman or when a person comes forward with a story about a crime, whether it's a serious crime, a social one or whatever, that we have to just take their word for it, which is nonsense. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, do you remember, what was it? I think Dave Chappelle did a bit about, what's his name? The actor, was it Justin Smollett? I can't remember. The guy who accused of being jumped by two thugs in MAGA hats in Chicago, which is hilarious because any guy wearing a MAGA hat in Chicago would probably get jumped themselves. But again, everyone had to believe him because, of course, well, you know, this guy wouldn't possibly lie given his colour, given the political climate at the time, his sexuality, things like that. And it turns out he was talking shit. And you know, it's the implication that we just have to believe them without questioning them. And if you do question them, you're a bad person because you're not taking them seriously. It's like, no, I am taking you seriously. I just want to make sure we've got all the details so that we can actually do something constructive with the tale that you've given us. So yeah, I mean, I don't automatically believe everybody just because they've told me a story about some dramatic event, criminal or otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with that totally.
Sorry, Irina?
I said I agree with you completely.
Yeah. What was it? Kay, what was it? I've forgotten what Kay's point was. Kay made a very interesting point that I wanted to come back on, and I've completely forgotten what it was. What did you last say, Kay? Can you remember?
I don't even remember what the last thing I said was, quite honestly.
It was something I wanted to challenge.
Being like old? I remember that. It was 2006, right?
Yeah, the original
yes,
Me Too movement,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. The problem that I have, because this exposes another problem that I've got with the current incarnation, shall we say, of the Me Too movement, is that it's been co-opted by radical feminists who are inherently sexist in their philosophy. They don't like men, they don't trust men, they don't like male sexuality, they don't like male sexual activity, they don't really know the difference between sort of like, they don't really understand how to manage male behavior. They believe that all men are oppressors. They either benefit from patriarchy or they're patriarchs, and so they don't listen. I mean, as someone who has been sexually assaulted 3 times by men, twice by women, most of the radical feminists that I've spoken to, online and in life, don't really care. They just don't care. It's like, well, it's better for you because you're a bloke. It's like, no, it's still horrible, and because I've gone through it, I actually have more empathy for women who've experienced it, actually. So it was kind of an educational experience in some weird, twisted, sinister way. But it's, yeah, they just don't take it seriously. Someone pointed out that while men experience almost 50% of domestic violence victims are male, there are no dedicated shelters for men for like domestic violence refuges and things like that. And it's like, actually, that's a really good point. There's a problem, I think, in our culture where we just assume that the women are victims and the men can't be in some weird way. And I think that's a problem I've got with the Me Too movement as well.
Ken, it's funny because I think that like whenever it really like comes down to like the base of things, we agree on a lot. I think that we have kind of a different perspective on it. Because you see the Me Too movement, it has been co-opted in a lot of ways by radical feminists. And as somebody that identifies as a feminist, radical feminists irritate the crap out of me because they take all of these really, really productive conversations and they steer it away from what it needs to be about. And then we're not getting anything accomplished with these conversations. They've done it with so many issues, not just with the Me Too movement. And so for me, like whenever I started identifying as a feminist, I had a lot of people saying, like, why would you identify as a feminist whenever there's such a negative stigma around identifying as a feminist? Why not, call yourself an egalitarian or so on and so forth? And I had told them, I was like, I think that there is a lot of benefit in the idea of feminism. And I think that putting forth the effort and fighting to somewhat reclaim what that means is a worthwhile effort. And I feel the exact same way about the Me Too movement. I think that there are a lot of beneficial conversations that have come out since the conception of the Me Too movement in 2006 and really in 2017, even when it attracted a lot of bad faith characters, a lot of radical idealists that took the message and kind of ran in all kinds of directions with it and began alienating men from it, there were a lot of men that were able to find a sense of comfort and a sense of safety to come forward. And it really did normalize to an extent for a lot of men to be able to come forward and talk about their sexual assaults publicly, particularly in online arenas. Um, and I do believe that there are things that we need to do to kind of reel it back in. I think that radical feminists, more centralized feminists, need to be more active in calling out radical feminists for their alienation of men sexual assault survivors. But I am of the opinion, at least as of right now, I mean, it may change in the future. I may become more pessimistic that we should not just take this movement and completely scrap it because bad faith characters have kind of tried to take it and run in a different direction than it was meant to. I think that it was super beneficial in 2017 whenever the original founder of the Me Too movement came out and kind of tried to redirect the conversation back to what the Me Too movement was meant to be. And she did an interview, I think it was with the BBC, where she was talking about how like the end game of the Me Too movement for her whenever she started it was so that sexual assault victims, whether they are male or female, regardless of what their gender identity is, can stop feeling like they are in any way at fault for their sexual assault and have a safe space in society to come forward and be like, this happened to me. This is, what I struggle with because of it. This is what I can bring to the table so that it doesn't happen to other people. This is what the tips that I can give to help you, and just creating an overall safe space for people to come forward and report their sexual assaults.
I mean, I think that one of the things with that is there is a place for you to safely report your sexual assaults, and it's a police station. And social media and the internet itself will never be a safe space, ever. No matter how many things we put into it, there will always be people who specifically seek out those people who are trying to raise awareness or who are hurting and putting out their story to make them feel bad. It's what people on the internet do. I'm not sure that you'll ever like find that safe space,
And I don't agree. And I think that, the internet is a tool and it's kind of up to the individual how they choose to use it. I don't see the internet as a bad or a good. It's just a neutral thing and it varies from person to person. But with things like the Me Too movement, it has kind of created communities online where that is kind of a created safe space where even if you do have people that go out of their way to come into these these safe spaces that communities have created within the internet and just be assholes and make people feel bad about themselves, you have entire communities of people now rallying behind that person and pushing that negativity out. I'm not really one of those people that gets a whole lot of benefit emotionally or mentally from, like sharing personal experiences online and having people rally around me. But I have met so many people, particularly like regarding because I'm a pro-life activist and I deal with a lot of women that have gone through pregnancy loss and having that safety, that community that they've found in online spaces to talk about their miscarriages or their stillbirths has been really, really beneficial to their mental and emotional health regarding that situation. So, yes, there are always going to be people who are going to be assholes online. There's always going to be the detestable parts of the internet. But there also are the benefits of having communities that span across oceans to all continents of people that have had similar experiences and can find emotional and mental like community with each other through the internet.
Picking up on that though, talking about the creation of safe spaces on the internet, Newton's law, isn't it? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Because I mean, I believe that, Kay, you are sincere in what you're saying, that you want to create safe spaces for women to talk about pregnancy loss and things like that. I'm not accusing you of anything. I wouldn't dream of it. What I would suggest, though, is that with the Me Too movement, because it's been corrupted by various bad actors, not necessarily radical feminists as people taking the piss, let's be honest, trolls find their way into any online sphere. I learned that the hard way. The fact that men are being pushed out of those spaces and are not allowed to talk about the assaults and things like that, it's leading to a rise of, I mean, obviously you guys must know the terms incel and MGTOW. I dare say you've actually met those people. I haven't actually. I very rarely interact with them, but we all know what they are. But
You're
those
so lucky.
yeah, they're not nice people, really.
They're so terrible.
Yeah, but the trouble is that a lot of those guys, yeah, some of them are just raving misogynists. Some of them are, let's be fair, repressed homosexuals. That they're another group that make it into the MGTOW circles and things like that. But a lot of those guys are just lost young men or lost guys who have been the victim of X, Y, Z, and the other thing, and have found a community of people who are going to listen to them. And so that's where I think a lot of this is what happens if you don't police the Me Too spaces properly and allow men to come forward with their stories. They're going to go looking for a group of people who want to hear them. And if those are incels or MGTOWs, well, that's kind of the fault of the Me Too movement or the failure of those administrating it, you know. So, yeah, I don't like the idea of safe spaces anyway, because I think it's infantilizing and it doesn't help people deal with psychological trauma as much as people say it does. As someone who has a history of depression, I know what it's like to suffer from mental illness, and a safe space where I get to hug a teddy and play with plasticine or Play-Doh doesn't appeal to me at all. But that's just personal bias, I guess. The creation of safe spaces, because you say that you talk about people who are detestable, and yeah, there are detestable people, we agree, but it depends on your definition of detestable, who gets to stay and who gets to go, and it's that kind of arbitrary sorting hat mentality I'm not entirely comfortable with.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we are human beings and human beings aren't perfect. And like I said earlier, I think that more center-leaning feminists that haven't been radicalized need to do a better job about calling out the radicalization of other feminists. Radical feminists aren't something that we should be tolerating. Their message is just as toxic as I guess at the other end of the spectrum, you would have incels.
Yeah.
They're equally as toxic and they're equally as unproductive, and it's like a cancer in any movement, social or political, to give a pass to ideas that are discriminatory in any way. And that's what the Me Too movement is struggling with. Like, we had the Me Too movement, it began in 2006, and it was very much just about sexual assault survivors, both male and female. And then whenever it blew up in 2017, because of the conversations that were being had surrounding Harvey Weinstein's victims, which happened to be female, the conversation shifted into talking specifically about women sexual assault survivors. And I think that there needs to be more of an effort to kind of separate the two. There's a lot of conversations being had on a social level about women's issues right now. Feminism is really, really just gathering speed, and adding their women that are identifying as feminists are is actually growing in the United States, and it's crossing political and social boundaries with women and men who identify as feminists and want to talk about women's issues. Whenever it comes to talking about the Me Too movement, we need to get back to having this conversation simply be about sexual assault survivors, regardless of their sex.
The I think no. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. As someone, I don't identify. Although I have some sympathy with some feminist ideas, I don't identify as a feminist because the trouble I have with feminism as a philosophy is that it's such a broad church that the statement "I am a feminist" means nothing because it can mean anything. As far as I've read feminist articles pro-life and pro-choice, for marriage, against marriage, for sex work, against sex work, for abort, and all sorts of weird, for even sex positive and sex negative, suggesting that women should choose to be lesbians because it's the only way they can be liberated. It's such a broad church. I've got no idea what the statement actually means. So I basically say, I'll just be nice and like not punch people, and then hopefully that will be enough. And I have to just be that basic. What was I going to say about feminism? Yeah, the trouble with feminism, because I've read basically all the feminist texts going back to Mary Wollstonecraft, bringing it forward. I used to teach a lot of it. Is that the clues in the title really? The radicals are born of the idea that they need to feminize the culture because they believe that masculinity is at the heart of the problem with sexual assault. Like Harvey Weinstein is toxically masculine. Who else can we pick on? Johnny Depp was accused of it and things like that. So it's masculinity itself that needs to be overridden. So I think where you say that feminism is growing in the United States, I assume that that's true. I'm going to cast aspersions, but it's still a tiny minority of people because they get the sense that the entire movement is itself poisoned. So it's not just the Me Too movement that's a problem. It's the underlying philosophy, feminist philosophy, that's also causing concern, shall we say, among the general populace. And I think that's why you're getting a lot of backlash, where people are not picking up the ball and running with it. Feel free to call me out. Feel free to call me out my nonsense, but everyone's gone quiet.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So it's okay. So this is something that's come up a good few times. I just want to personally just kind of say this as well. I believe in justice for Johnny Depp, 100%. Anyway. Yes, Kay, I 100% agree. Fuck turfs. There's not in that way, but tell him to fuck off. Anyway, you know what I mean.
You've seen Julie Bindle. I wouldn't touch that with a stick. Carry on.
But so this kind of idea, kind of that you had said a couple of minutes ago now, was that there was no like refuge shelters for men, or like something along those lines. That there was no like safe havens in the same way for like sexual assault or any sort of like spousal abuse or any of these sorts of things. They do exist. They're not very common and they're not very well known, but they do exist. I've worked in one as part of my college experience, so I know that they exist, but it's like. So if your kind of main argument on that is, promote these more, make them more well known, show people where they are, teach about them, say that, that there is nothing to be ashamed of if you are a man and you are being abused in the home, whether it be physical or sexual, you can go to these places. So if that's your argument, I 100% agree with you. But the kind of argument that I thought that I heard, I'm more than willing to be corrected on it, was that these shelters don't exist. That's what I thought you said anyway.
Okay, poorly phrased. So they exist. They might exist because you've worked in one, but they don't exist in the popular imagination. They're not promoted as much. The expectation is that they don't exist. I mean, because I used to, talking about my past, when I was 16, I did what we call, I don't know what you, probably in America you have something different. We call it work experience, where you basically shadow people for a week or two to see what it's actually like to earn a living. And I worked with a photojournalist for a local newspaper, and part of her work was going to a shelter called the Dove Project, which is a women's refuge, what we used to call a battered women's shelter. And so I know that those places exist, and you can find them because they're openly promoted. To be honest, there could be 200 shelters for men in the UK, but I haven't heard of one of them. And if you ask most people in the person in the street, they haven't heard of them either. So what's the actual point? But the other of the problem is that if a man is to go, because then again, the culture needs to shift slightly on this, and Kay acknowledges this as well. If a man comes forward, the expectation is that he sucks it up and gets on with it. Maybe he gets a sympathetic ear, but then they just buy him a pint and they tell him to, drink it down and stop whinging. And so this is why a lot of problems that are occurring in the culture, like the rise of incels, the rise of big towels, lest we forget the number one cause of unnatural death for men under the age of 45 is suicide in the UK. I think that's true in the United States as well. Why are they killing themselves? Why? Because they can't, they're stuck, they can't talk to people, they can't communicate. And the Me Too movement, as Kay has pointed out, back in the good old days, was an egalitarian, non-partisan, anti-sexist movement, has been corrupted, and it's now all about women. The other thing that really wound me up, though, is about the Me Too movement, is that, do you remember, was it 2017? It must have been 2017, where the Golden Globes, or was it? Yeah, it was the Golden Globes. They hosted an evening where all the ladies wore black dresses. Do you remember? There was a big demonstration where all the celebrities wore black dresses. Like Oprah was in a black number, and there's dresses that cost more than I earn in a year, and they were wearing them as to show solidarity with the Me Too movement. The thing that really annoyed me about that is because, of course, they're presenting themselves as victims of the structure, but a lot of them would have profited from it. A lot of them would have profited, because, we've all seen the pictures of Oprah Winfrey hobnobbing with Harvey Weinstein. I want to know how many of them actually knew what was going on and said nothing. I also want to know how many of them, but let's be blunt, how many of them took him up on the offer and got something out of it? Because that's another thing that never comes up ever in the Me Too conversations. I'm not saying that invalidates, talking about the subject. I'm just saying it does wind me up when if the way it's presented, all men are perpetrators, all women are victims, but then you've got women who knew exactly what was going on and said nothing, or profited from whatever Mr. Weinstein and co were doing. That also winds me up a little bit. That's why I'm also not on the side of the Me Too movement, because I think a lot of the people who support it are hypocrites. But again, feel free to jump in on that one. It's a bit of a...
Oh, yeah. So you had kind of said something about like how many women have kind of taken Harvey Weinstein up on that offer. They likely didn't do so consensually, or at the barest of minimum, there was some coercion involved, right? So Harvey used this idea of, hey, this happens. We all know what this means in this context. This happens, and you're going to get that part, and you're going to get this role or this position or this whatever. If you use a sex act as a barrier to you getting that position, that's not a consensual relationship. That's not a like free trade, if you want to kind of use that phrase for it. There was an element of coercion there. So it's not, so to kind of say, well, if some women did it, therefore, it's it's fine. Like, and I'm not even necessarily saying that you're saying that, but the point is to try and use that as like an attack. It just doesn't really land for me. You know what I mean? I don't really see it.
I know. I understand that there's a power imbalance, because Harvey Weinstein, for all his sexual and psychological faults, is one of the greatest producers that Hollywood has ever produced. He's got a great eye for talent and things like that. That's why he was so successful for so many years. He turned Miramax from an art house studio that no one's heard of into a major mainstream studio. Is Pulp Fiction that actually bankrolled a lot of their later projects. So there is a power imbalance, because as a Hollywood producer, he's a power broker, and therefore you got to make nice with the producer, otherwise you don't get a gig. Now, there is a way of obviously attracting talent and pleasing the producer that doesn't involve getting naked in a hotel room and doing things that Uncle Harvey tells you to do. I'm not suggesting for a moment that it is an equal and fair exchange. But what I am concerned by is because the thing is, it's the sin of omission. It's like, how many of the ladies, we've never heard a story from any of the ladies who took him up on the offer, and I'm using a euphemism because this is YouTube. You never hear those stories, and you never hear stories from ladies. No one has come forward and confessed and said, I saw this thing was happening. No, correction. Quentin Tarantino has come forward and said, I saw Mr. Weinstein doing something naughty and I said nothing. And he got absolutely shellacked for doing that because, well, you should have said something. You're a man. You've got to take, you've got to intervene and, stop bad male behavior. But there are also ladies in the room who must have seen something and done nothing and said nothing and maybe even profited from Mr. Weinstein and just turned a blind eye to it. And that's another thing. My point isn't that it's okay if they say yes, because if you say yes under duress, it's not consent. I agree with you entirely. The problem is that it's presented as it's the man's responsibility to stop it, but it's also the responsibility of the women as well. So you've got to. It just bothers me. It's a kind of sexism, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe again, if I'm wrong, educate the English. That's fine. But as I say, you can't just heap it all on the blokes and ask why didn't you stop it. It's like, well, why did you go along with it? Why did you ladies? Why did you not stop it as well? Why didn't you try and do something about it? And some women did. Some of them tried. So as far back as the 1930s, if you forget Harvey Weinstein. And those women are to be respected. But a lot of ladies didn't. And that's I don't know. I'm just ranting now.
I don't. Okay. So this is not to defend anybody or anything else like that, especially given what we're kind of talking about. To do this properly and to do it 100% justly, where I don't come across as if I'm defending somebody. This would have to be in an edited video that I don't know how to do, and this is not, it's live. So if I come across as if I'm doing that, I'm sorry, I'm not. But for the women who, as Kendon said, took Weinstein up on his offer and or that saw things and didn't really say anything. For a very, very, very long time, as Kendon also said, Harvey Weinstein was one of the most powerful people in all of Hollywood. And, any sort of attack on him was detrimental for other producers, for other directors, for other studios. So there was an implicit incentive not to talk about it. Because if you did, then you were going to be fired from this future gig or from that future gig or from this future gig. And again, that is not to defend anybody on doing anything. That's not to say, oh, well, it was okay then that they said nothing because that allowed Harvey Weinstein to do more. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there was a net negative at the time to talk about the things that Harvey Weinstein did. So if we, this is not just about, changing the behaviors of future Harvey Weinsteins, but it is about changing the system as a whole that incentivizes silencing women. That's what we need to change.
Okay, I see your point, but I raise you this question. Why is it, though, that when I read, and again, Kay has probably got stuff that contradicts this, but the stuff that I have read, this is all official publications related to Me Too. Why is it it's always about men policing their own behavior, policing other men's behavior, women criticizing men for what they're about, which is fine. If poor behavior from anybody should be criticized. But there must also be responsibility heaped upon women, ladies, who know something and don't speak. There are some women who have come forward in history. I've read a collection of Me Too essays where the opening essay is about a woman whose Hollywood career was destroyed because she tried to talk about the casting couch in the 1930s. And that's obviously not fair. I'm not suggesting that it is. Put that one side. You've never heard of her, basically. This actress was like a minor chorus girl back in the days when their musicals were big. And so, but she came forward anyway and tried to do something about it and failed in the attempt. It was a noble failure, but ultimately a failure. It's not it can't, the responsibility for changing the system cannot fall exclusively on men just because a man failed. It's not just Quentin Tarantino's fault that he didn't do anything about Harvey Weinstein, because there are ladies around Harvey Weinstein, actresses, producers, casting directors, but someone who works in the craft service truck, I don't really care. Someone saw something and said nothing, and every single one of them is guilty. But because, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can perceive it, because they're female, because they're women, the expectation isn't the same. And I would argue that that is a sexist distinction. If I see something and I don't report it, that's my fault. If Kay sees something and doesn't report it, that's also her fault. But in the eyes of the Me Too movement, she would be given some members of the Me Too movement, she would be given a pass. And I would argue that that's not fair. That's my basic point.
I can kind of elaborate a little bit on that. Obviously, this isn't always the case, and there are going to be situations where, I do believe that there probably were women that were very, very aware of what Harvey Weinstein was doing. He had been doing this for a very, very long time. It's impossible that nobody was aware that this was going on. Everybody was very well aware of it, and they didn't say anything about it, and that's on men and women. A little bit to what Steven said, talking about how, women did have to worry somewhat about having their careers ruined if they did come forward. Harvey Weinstein was very, very influential in 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 the area that was paying their bills, was keeping them rich. And although I don't condone that, in a more everyday sense of, everyday people that aren't celebrities, that aren't in the public eye, that don't have, millions upon millions of dollars to lose or gain in these situations. Women, even if it's somebody that's outside of the assault that is taking place, if a woman sees another man doing something to a girl, historically, women are less likely to come forward and try to stop it or report it, or be a witness in criminal investigations to it, because women have genuinely been scared of coming forward. Um, there is very few things on this earth that are scarier than a man that thinks that he's entitled to sex being denied sex, and a man that is willing to go to the lengths of assaulting someone to get what he wants is someone that is very, very dangerous. So women historically have been less likely to come forward in these situations, be like, you need to stop doing this. That's not okay. I saw this happen, because they have feared the blowback. It's one of those things that we kind of like laughing, like kind of jokingly talk about, men have to worry about being like rejected in bars or laughed at, and women have to be worried about being raped and murdered and left in the street. Women do have genuinely very, very real fears and concerns whenever coming forward, even if they weren't the ones that were assaulted, just being someone that witnessed the assault or tried to stop the assault from happening. And I would go as far to say that the Me Too movement has kind of given women a little bit more of a backbone and a little bit more of a community to come together and say, like, all of these women in this room are seeing what you're doing. It's not okay, and you're not going to do it, and you need to get the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I know. Okay, I take that point. The idea is that, the only thing is the old. I mean, probably I shouldn't mention his name given his history, but Louis C.K. has a marvelous joke about this, where he says, you have to worry about getting raped or murdered. What do I have to worry about? Heart disease, and that's pretty much it. This is idea that, because men. Let's not be coy about it. Let's be serious about this. Men on average are physically superior to women in the same weight class. So women are not physically intimidating the same way that a man is. I've actually had these encounters in lifts. Like, it's really weird when I'm in the office building at work, because I work for a bank, and I'm standing there, and the other person in the lift or the elevator, sorry to translate it into colonial, is a woman. And I can tell that as soon as I walk in, because I've got the beard, and sometimes I've got my sunglasses on, I'm covered in tattoos. I look like a convicted sex offender. Let's be honest. And again, it's weird because you can see there's that little look flitting over her face, and I know it's there, and I spot it, and she's very good at controlling it. So a lot of these ladies, but I know why that expression is there. I know why that you're feeling that way, and it kind of bothers me because I know that I'm innocent of such urges, but she doesn't know that. all I can say based on what you've said is summon your courage. And try and obviously if someone's attacking you, it's easy for me to say that, I understand that, but if you have been the victim of something, then come forward, get a group of friends together to come forward. The feminist movement back in the 60s was all about liberation, taking control of your life, your destiny, your career, your future, do what you want to do, self-empowerment. I mentioned in my opening remarks that there's a kind of an ironic return to pre-feminist courtship rituals and rules regarding the sexual interaction between men and women. It's almost like, and this is a kind of, you probably won't like her name, Camille Paglia take on this, the idea that they've tasted freedom and it's scary, so they're trying to move back. And they're saying, no, men have to restrict themselves. I say, carry a knife. Carry a weapon, because I don't know a single bloke who has any sympathy for a guy who tries it on and then gets stabbed by a lady who told him no several times. I've had that conversation with guys. No, seriously, I've had that conversation with blokes. It's like, and with women, it's like guys don't have any sympathy for men who put their hands on you. They just don't. Not the ones that I know. Some guys are monsters, and that's true, but none of my circle. So yeah, just summon your courage. Remember your own strength. Carry a weapon if necessary. Stick your fingers in his eyes. That usually works. Just like that, and just no one cares. Just be stronger. That's. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also important to note that if you do witness something, you can file an anonymous police report. Like, you can do things without your name being stuck to things. And I think that the Me Too movement, kind of bringing it back to social media itself, it gives this feeling, right, that you can post on social media, this happened, and it's almost like giving a police report. You've admitted it and it feels good and it gets it off your chest, but unfortunately it doesn't actually do anything to get that person the help that they need or off the streets or anything like that. And I think that, I know we've been talking about Weinstein a lot, and I think that that's like a little bit older, but in more recent news, stuff like James Charles, he has been found to have sent pictures to underage kids. At least 17 of them have come out now. And all of this stuff is happening on social media, and there's not one police report about this man that has all of this proof that he's preying on little boys. He's preying on 16-year-old boys, and these boys are tweeting this out and putting this out there, and they're getting their story out. But he's not getting held accountable for any of this.
There's also another problem, Irina, sorry if I may jump on that point, because James Charles, if we're thinking about the YouTuber who does makeup tutorials, that is what we're talking about, yeah. Because James Charles is also a member of the Team Rainbow, the LGBT community, he's kind of almost protected in a weird way. He doesn't get quite the same flack. Do you remember when Kevin Spacey was accused by Anthony Ujima-Flip? Yeah, Kevin Spacey, he completely ballsed up his apology because he came out as gay in the same letter, and the LGBT, the Rainbow Mafia, came down on that and said, no, you don't. We know exactly what you're doing. You've denied your sexuality for years. You're now. You say again?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, he said you basically, the rumors about his sexuality have been around for years. You've been accused by a guy of sexually assaulting him when he was underage, because the age of consent in America is 18, isn't it? It's not 16 as it is in the UK. So this guy was like 17 and you put your hands on him. Now you're telling the world that you're gay. You haven't supported the gay rights movement at all, and now you're trying to take some of the credos, and they binned him. But James Charles, because of course he is an LGBT activist, I have a sneaking suspicion that has given him a kind of level of protection in a weird way. You're right, I agree with you, Irina, in the sense that because these kids on social media are posting in the worst way possible, they're not going to the law with their stories, it's not going to go forward. But there's almost not the same energy behind it, because James Charles, as a member of the LGBT community, is oppressed by the culture. And so it's weird. It doesn't have the same power, they would argue, as, say, Harvey Weinstein does. Anyway, feel free to jump on that, because I realise I'm probably offending half the audience just by speaking. That's
kind of my thing, is where I'm like, I cannot sit here and look at this movement and say, this movement did good things and is really working properly, when I'm now watching, it's years later, and there is a man who is directing content towards young, male gay creators, and then using that platform to now do this. And this has been openly and brought to the media. The media is all over it, and there's still nothing being done about it. Like, I can't see how that would be a plus side.
Okay. I don't personally think that the whole kind of like, the Team Rainbow kind of like defends that much in like every case at a bare minimum. Okay. So there was, obviously growing up in Ireland, everybody knows about Irish history and stuff like that. And a particular portion of Irish history is the fact that there was a lot of abuse going on in the Catholic Church. Now, that was, everything else like that. But okay, so why I brought that up was because that was done under, same gender relations. Yeah, that part didn't even come into it. It was called out because of what it was, which was rape, which was, a power imbalance. There was like all of these things that we've talked about in virtually every other case. It doesn't. I don't think it matters to the vast majority of people what your sexual orientation is. If you are guilty of or even likely guilty of some form of sexual assault or harassment, etc., that is enough to get called out. And you guys almost kind of proved that, in the sense that how much flack is James Charles after getting? How much backlash is he after getting? Not just on social medias, but also on YouTube. How many creators have covered him and have talked about this story? So, it's the kind of issue that I would kind of see, or the, extra step that I think needs to be done, is for all of these people who are going out on social media and are talking about what happened with their experience with James Charles, for them to go to the police. Because if they don't go to the police, then, I mean, like, the kind of police not necessarily can't, but most likely don't act on that sort of thing if they don't have any sort of a report or an account, etc., to go off of. So rather than going onto social media, or at a bare minimum, as well as going onto social media and telling what happened and stuff like that, also go to the police. That's what I think the main issue here is. Not about the fact that people are talking about it on social media, or about what James Charles' sexual orientation is. I really don't think that stuff matters. He was called out equally for it.
I agree totally.
Yeah, I could be wrong about this. I'm not exactly sure, because I don't know exactly. I don't know all the information about these victims. But I do believe that the reason why no police reports were filed, and why this is all just like a social media kind of social attack, is because of the age of consent laws in California, where James Charles lives. I think that might be a competing issue with actually filing a police report, because I think that, at least for most of the victims that I'm aware of, it's not a legal issue because of age of consent laws, which I don't agree with. But unfortunately, there are a lot of states in the United States that have age of consent laws that are as low as 16.
I'll be totally honest, I have no idea. It was like a rabbit hole I went down on YouTube last night or something.
Yeah, I don't understand the peculiarities of American consent laws, so I don't quite know how that would affect the case. I mean, obviously, if he's soliciting attention from well, if he's sending like dick pics and things like that, it's still wrong. But the point I'm making is that because James Charles is not seen as a masculine aggressor, because he's definitely not masculine, whatever else you say about him, he's seen as a lesser threat, even though what he's actually doing is just as repulsive as, say, if I did it, or if James did it. I'm going to pick on James because he's there and he's been very quiet. There's a kind of, it's not just sexism, it's a kind of not heterophobia, that's not where I'm going with it, but you understand my basic point. It's the idea that because James Charles might be guilty of X, Y, Z and the other thing, but because he's a gentle character and he's not masculine, not aggressive, not a traditional sort of manly man type, it's not seen as such a severe thing, even though clearly it is. So whatever he's getting on YouTube, great. If there is a backlash, fantastic. I have seen a couple of videos on it because I don't really follow James Charles, so I don't really care that much. But yeah, it's not enough. It's not the response isn't negative enough because I don't think it's because of the accused.
My entire point was just like, there needs to be another step involved, because you can do this, but it doesn't change anything. And if anything, it desensitizes the media to that type of thing. So when police do get involved and things do go to trial, people don't follow it as much because it's just out there all the time, but nothing's ever being done about it. So no one cares.
Yeah, that's the point. So yeah, YouTube isn't real life, unfortunately. There's a real world with real meat people in it, and they need to be told. And something in the real meat space needs to be done. So. Well.
If you guys are ready for it, we can jump into the Q&A, but not to rush it, because this has been a really enjoyable conversation. Like, these are my favorite types, where it's kind of friendly and professional, and rather than a crazy dumpster fire. So do appreciate that. Want to remind you folks, our guests are linked in the description. So if you have not already, look down in the description box for their links so that you can hear more where that came from. Well, hey, what are you waiting for? We really do appreciate our guests. We do encourage you to check out their links down below. And so with that, we will indeed jump into the Q&A. Sounds like you guys are all ready?
Yeah. Yeah,
cool. Here we go. Thank you very much. From Bubblegum Gun says, make it a bet debate. Winner takes the money. Sam doing it for free. Crowder being a sissy. This is actually from the other night, I think. Basically, folks, if you have not heard, we did start a crowd fund for the potential Steven Crowder versus Sam Cedar debate. I still, after numerous calls and emails to Steven Crowder's agent, have not heard back, which is surprising because I told them we've had 2 successful crowd funds. We're ready to take the next big step. And I've actually been hearing back from people who are like, I'm, willing to throw in a lot.
Everyone's
I don't know if it's
favorite
going
Republican
to happen.
toddler.
Huh?
Everyone's favorite Republican toddler.
It could be juicy, but folks, I got to let you know that I already have contacted Indiegogo to ask if they could initiate full refunds. And don't worry, everybody will get their money back. That's guaranteed. But just want to let you know, that's how certain I am that there won't actually be a Crowder debate. But thank you very much, Bubblegum, for that question. Cider and Port says, for real though, James, only pay Crowder after the debate.
This was definitely from the last one.
That's right. Cider was not doing super chats during this debate. This one coming in from Steven Steen says, Steven went too far taking away sex pigs. Well, nasty guy, Steven Steen. And secular socialist.
I don't understand.
Secular.
I made a point in my opening statement, which was like, if all of the leaders of the world come out against you, like you can't fuck pigs anymore. Yeah.
Like I said, we have quite the range of different people from different walks of life here. Secular socialist says, if less than 1% of rape allegations are false, why does it seem too? I think they meant too common, like two as in TOO.
Well, actually,
they portray it.
Sorry, was that Arena?
The way they portray it, there's a big. People seek that information out, so it seems more common.
That is also true. What I was going to say was that, like, media, in print and on news, they run off of, like clicks and on views and stuff like that. And, look, if this shit was to happen every single day, it's not exciting, it's not different, it's not interesting. If there was a mass shooting in Ireland, for example, it would still be on the news 5 years from now, because it never fucking happens here. There's a mass shooting almost every other day in the United States. Not all of them get reported because it's just horrifically common. That's just unfortunately how the news media works. So, these sorts of false rape allegations, because they are being propagated for, or they're being pushed and they're being out there so much, it seems like it's horrifically common. But that's just because of how rare they are, that when they do occur, unfortunately, that's why the media shows it and talks about it, because it's rare.
There's also something else that needs to be when they say only less than 1% of rape allegation, I can't even say it. Rape allegations are false. The full statement should be less than 1% of rape allegations are proven false, because of course until you actually test the theory, you don't know. So, but that's conveniently left out as well, which I mean, I'm not suggesting that the number is, like 50% of rape allegations are false. I don't have that kind of data to support that. That's be pure speculation. But yeah, I don't like the use of that stat to suggest that in the debate, because the problem with rape is that it's a rapist is a legally protected term. You can't go around, for example, there are certain American politicians, keeping it bland, who've been accused of horrendous sex, but because they've never been convicted in a court of law, I think you know which one I'm referring to. He used to, sit in the Oval Office. You can't go around calling him. Well, okay, fair enough. You can't go around using the R word. You can't, because because they could sue you for libel. So it's the idea of less than 1% of rape allegations are false. It's proven false, and I think that's something that needs to be added. Sorry, I'm just stumbling now. It's too late in the day.
No worries. Everybody feel good on that? If anybody else wants to respond.
Mm-hmm.
You got it. Next one. Secular Socialist, thanks so much, says Stephen and Kay. How do you respond to the statement, quote unquote, she was asking for it?
Punching someone in the face?
That's an appropriate reaction. I would kind of just go for more so of a thing of, I personally think that the like people who use that line more often, if we were to group them together and title that group, let's just call them virgins. This whole thing of like she was asking for it. If a woman is asking for it, you'll fucking know. And if she's not asking for it, then she's literally not asking for it. And if she's not literally asking for it, then she doesn't want it. Simple as.
Well,
you know if a woman is asking you. That's the point.
Yeah, I was going to say, if she were asking for it, it's not rape. I mean, that's implies that she's giving consent.
Thank you.
Think it through, chaps. Never mind. Oh God, I must admit, sometimes I do think the feminists have a point. I do despair at my sex on occasion. We are a loud, hairy, noisy breed that needs to grain it in. The only thing that I would say that builds up, well, no, I can't build on that, because that statement is just fucking stupid, isn't it? I mean, there's no wiggle room there. It's like if you say, well, she was asking for no, just, don't worry about it. Just
you got it.
If you're using the term, she was asking for it, have your vocal cords surgically removed and never speak again.
Well, no, I want them to say more stupid things so that we can just, verbally abuse them, because it's entertaining. It's like, you have the IQ of a pencil sharpener. Read a book. Do me a favor. Honestly.
You got it. And this one coming in from Do Appreciate Your Question, Chris Gammon says, some men are prematurely judged guilty when they are accused of something by a woman. But you can't blame women for that, right? Thoughts?
No one is saying that. Like, that's not the argument being made here. Like, the instance of Johnny Depp came up a lot in this conversation. That is where public opinion went horribly wrong. Amber Heard took him to court. It seemed to be pretty cut and dry that he had been abusive, and before all of the information was brought to light, the court of public opinion rendered him guilty, and he lost a lot. His life was ruined. He lost out on a ton of jobs that he had been a part of, and it was awful what they did to him. But it's not an argument being made that you can't blame Amber Heard for what she did to him. If you go and look at any of Amber Heard's social media posts and you look at the comments, people are tearing into her for what she did. She's not getting away with what she did. And there are even reports that, now that all of the information has come out that she was actually abusive, she is starting to lose out on acting opportunities the same way that Johnny Depp did. She's, karma is coming full circle for that woman. So nobody is arguing that we cannot blame women for the pain that men suffer whenever it comes to false accusations of any kind, or the court of public opinion jumping on something too soon before they have all the information.
See, I would build on that. I agree totally with Kay in that sense. That Amber Heard, and I was very pleased to see it, because Amber Heard was prepared to ruin a man's life. It doesn't matter if it's Johnny Depp or not, ruining a man's life presumably to improve her own profile ultimately, and maybe get better jobs and get sympathy from the crowd. So it was good that she came back. However, I think it's because of their celebrity status that that Johnny Depp's bouncing back. There are men who follow me on TikTok and who've posted videos that I've watched where they talk about they've been accused by a woman, they've lost work, they've had to leave town, their social lives have been completely ruined, etc., etc. And while they've been found innocent and therefore they have no criminal record, their lives have still been destroyed and they can't get that back. They can't rebuild. They often have to move to like town next door, or even go to another county because they don't tend to be American. So it's good that Amber Heard is being punished socially for what she did. Unfortunately, though, it's a rare event. And or at least I think it's a rare event, and there are lots of women who do get away with it with absolutely no repercussions. Nobody, they do women. Let's ask Kay and Arena really. Do women lose their circle of friends if they make such accusations against guys that are proven innocent?
No, not at all.
I wouldn't know.
And because I think that there's more of a support system there, and I wanted to bounce off that and say that I think that all false accusations of sexual assault should be tried, if not as bad as actual sexual assault. You can ruin someone's life that way. And if you're prepared to lie, if you are not willing to go into a courtroom and claim that honestly on in front of a judge that this happened, you shouldn't be trying to ruin someone's life that way.
I wouldn't know. I have to take your word for it.
I follow a lot of news sources that are I guess smaller, and I do see a lot of it. I see a lot of stuff that happens where women falsely accuse men of sexual assault, and then after the trials and after they've gone through things have said, I've lied, and nothing happens to them. They don't get punished. But a lot of times that person went to jail. That person dealt with those repercussions. They're still, a sex offender.
Thank you very
much.
If he says so.
Thank you very much. We'll only just because I didn't want to interrupt those. That's why I said it with the ... the ellipsis. Next, Secular Socialist. Thank you very much for your question as well. Says, what is each debater's most unpopular opinion?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I come from Tory TikTok, so most of my opinions are revolting to most of the people watching.
Oh my God. I have so many. What's my most unpopular opinion?
Well, you are a mad Irish socialist, Stephen, so, there's going to be a list.
That's true. Circle back to me. I'll have
I genuinely believe Avril Lavigne died in 2003.
What?
Yeah.
What?
There's this whole controversy about Avril Lavigne. It's a rabbit hole.
Please elaborate. This sounds bonkers, but it sounds
that is not an insane conspiracy theory.
I
if you look at the pictures,
she's on TikTok and everything.
No, it's Melissa.
It honestly, if you look at the pictures of her double back in the early 2000s and pictures of supposedly Avril Lavigne now, it is not an insane conspiracy to believe that she's not.
She killed herself, and they let her body double continue as her to continue the popularity in her line.
But the body double was like her twin. Then I don't.
She just. It's
I'm
another.
Have to look this up. This is brilliant.
Ken's going down the rabbit hole now.
Oh, no,
look it up. I'm just telling you guys. Avril Lavigne died in 2003. That's all I got.
2003. Okay. No. Okay, I will look that up. It's a bit like the rumor that Paul McCartney died before the Beatles got famous, and so they replaced him at the last minute. And the Paul McCartney that we know isn't actually Paul McCartney. Okay, I'm going to look that one up. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
I think my most unpopular opinion is so everybody remembers a couple of years ago when Caitlyn Jenner came out as Caitlyn Jenner, and there was so many people in magazines and on news stations and stuff like that was oh my God, she's gorgeous. No, she's fucking not. She's one of the ugliest women alive. But 100% a woman, 100% I'm totally on board with that. But she's fugly. So that's probably my most unpopular opinion.
I don't know. I've got so many I've got so many, Stephen. Stephen, we've obviously had many conversations on your channel. Can you think of the one that offended you the most? What one of my opinions bothered you the most? Do you remember? I mean, there are many.
Well, no, because I wouldn't really kind of say that it offended me. Like, I disagreed with it, but yeah.
Oh, come on, Stephen. Don't cop out the last minute. Come on.
I can't think off the top of my head. Can't think off the top of my head.
You got it. Anybody else? Any last juicy ones?
No.
I have too many unpopular opinions to narrow it down.
Oh, go on, Kay. Give us one.
Because pretty much every opinion that I've ever put out, I get backlash from one way or the other. Being with my political and social opinions, I very much I have right-leaning opinions, I have left-leaning opinions. No matter what I say, someone is upset.
So you're a free-thinking centrist then, like most sane, grounded people. Okay, fair. Yeah, I mean, I've got the same problem. It's like, it doesn't matter what you say, especially on the internet, you're going to offend a group of people. It's usually a small group, but you're going to offend a group of people anyway. So
okay, here it is, because I get flack for this from both the left and the right. My most unpopular opinion would have to be that organized religion has actually done more harm historically than good.
Oh, all right, okay.
Ooh,
I agree with that.
Okay. It's kind of traditional, but I see why that would piss a lot of people off. I kind of sort of agree.
Juicy.
I know where Stephen comes down on this, because Stephen, being Irish, has a sort of a rocky history with the church. Yeah, but
We'll jump into the next one. Secular Socialist also asked. Oh, actually, Stitches. Sorry, I missed yours. They said James, staring at the screen. Here you go, James, you sexy beast. Appreciate your super chat support. And Michael A says, can Kay define what she means by radical feminist? When I hear that term, I think of TERFs, which I agree are bad, but just for clarity.
Well, I would agree that TERFs suck. Fuck TERFs. But I don't think of TERFs as particularly radical, simply because I think that a lot of TERFs are really just, they have a more conservative viewpoint whenever it comes to trans people, and they just discriminate particularly against trans women. So I don't look at them as radical feminists. Whenever I talk about radical feminists, I mean more they've just gone completely off the rails. They absolutely hate men. They think that all things that are masculine are toxic and they need to be eradicated from the earth. These are the women that are constantly talking about how science has figured out a way for women to reproduce without the help of man through bone marrow, and then only reproduce women, so we don't need men anymore, therefore we should just kill all men. That's what I think of. That's what I'm talking about whenever I talk about radical feminists. They've gone so far what Americans would consider so far left that they've actually fallen off the political compass map. They're just insane.
Yeah, I mean, picking up on that, Kay, if I may be bold enough to mansplain, to use that disgusting verb. The thing about radical doesn't mean extreme. It means fundamental, doesn't it? They want to completely change society from the ground up. And if they believe that it's utterly masculine, it's male-dominated, it's patriarchal, that it's all got to come crashing down. So the reason radical feminists are just as ridiculous like radical Muslims, radical religionists of all kinds, radical Republicans. They're just extremists. There's what is it Winston Churchill said? A fanatic is someone who can't change their mind and won't change the subject. And that's pretty much why radical feminists suck, because they're just, you can't talk to them, you can't converse with them, it's their way or the highway. So yeah, sorry, Mike, that's it.
Next one, we'll jump into it. Appreciate your question. I missed it. Secular Socialist also asked, Stephen, what's the most offensive joke you've written but never told?
Ooh.
Do it.
Spill that tea.
Come on.
That's such a bad question to ask me. This is you're literally asking the same person who is arguing on behalf of the Me Too movement, who unironically made a fucking R. Kelly joke in my opening.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
It was a good R. Kelly joke, although I disagree.
I would dress my kid up like R. Kelly. Okay. Absolutely. I just want to make that a point. I was like, that's false. I would do that.
Okay, so I know what my most offensive joke that I've written but never told is. And the last time that I was asked to tell a joke on James's channel, James, your reaction was fucking stunning. It was just like that, but it was the most milk toast, like minor joke that I've ever told. Okay, oh my God. The most offensive joke that I've ever written but not told on stage, it's a little bit of a cop-out because it is a conversation that I had. So a couple of years ago, a friend of mine told me that she was pregnant, and I told her, I was like, wow, I'm actually a little bit surprised by that. And she said, why are you surprised? And I said, because I have previously analogized your vagina to the Gaza Strip. Now, she's not that into politics, so she asked me what I meant by that. And I said, well, because the Gaza Strip is an area of land which has been so brutally pummeled that no child could ever hope to crawl out alive.
Next up, thank you very much for your questions. This one coming on from, let's see.
See, I'm laughing. I've got an Israeli flag hanging on the wall behind me, but I'm still thinking that was fun. I still think that was funny. That was good stuff.
Bubblegum Guns.
Americans aren't ready. Karen.
Bubblegum Gun says, we cannot talk about #MeToo without bringing up the very real probability our government is running a pedo cult. McAfee and Epstein were killed.
They didn't kill themselves.
Oh, yeah. I'm thoroughly convinced. I mean, I know it's a conspiracy theory. I'm going to hop on the conspiracy theory bandwagon. The American government is absolutely chocked full of pedos.
100%. Oh, absolutely.
The British Parliament as well. It's notorious. I mean, I don't believe Jeffrey Epstein killed himself either. I don't. It's very, very suspicious. The whole thing's murky. I also love the fact how it became a meme and then disappeared, and now no mainstream news outlet is talking about it anymore. Yeah, so the British government definitely. I mean, people like you. Have the Americans heard the name Jimmy Savile? Do you know who Jimmy Savile was? No. You don't really want to. He's probably the most revolting looking man you've ever seen in your life. Imagine the stereotypical, the creepy neighbor in Family Guy who fancies Chris. Yeah?
Yeah.
Imagine a British version of that in a tracksuit, in a jogging outfit.
That's so true. That's so
God.
But the thing is, he was on telly for decades, like 40 odd years. That guy was on British telly going now then with his cigars, and he's utterly repulsive.
Y'all made a
But
mistake.
he molested like 450 kids. It's the biggest sex scandal in British history.
Yeah.
But
Oh
he
my
was
God.
protected because he was he went round. He spent Christmas once with Margaret Thatcher. He had the ear of the Prince of Wales and everything else. And so I reckon that there must be within the British establishment a circle of offenders, not necessarily pedophiles, just random rapists.
Ties with Prince Harry.
Say again?
There's ties with Epstein and Prince Harry?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, it's Prince Harry, so I wouldn't be surprised.
So, yeah,
Wasn't there like
pretty sure.
a GCSE question in England a couple of years ago about Gary Glitter? That there was like during like the music exam, I think it was, which look, so obviously that's just horrible. But I mean, but for so many angles, because if there is ever somebody that you don't want to associate the phrase, shh, turn over, you have an hour, it's not the best type of that was just weird. That was weird.
No, actually, Gary, I don't, because you're a nonce. So the Americans don't. Do you know? You don't know who Gary Glitter is, do you? Gary Glitter. Does that name ring any bells? No. See, British pop culture doesn't get that far. It drowned somewhere in the North Atlantic.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We should hunt pedophiles for sport.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. That sounds fun.
Eat the animals, kill the pedos.
So
I propose there's an alternative to fox hunting in the UK. That we hunt monsters. We just get the dogs out. Yeah.
I'm curious, Kendon, or Stephen, maybe, given that you're both from across the pond from us Americans, because it is a popular conspiracy theory. It sounds like, I mean, do you think that the beliefs and rumors are as pervasive and comprehensive in your countries regarding your leaders in terms of them being pedos? Or do you think that is there like a serious like thought that there are a lot of high level government official other people who are high level you could say SES wise that are pedos?
Well, I mean, my country's government was run by the Catholic Church for decades. So, I mean, literally, yes. But I'll leave the rest of that over to Kendon.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, British people, I mean, obviously Ireland, totally different country. They've made that position clear, but over the centuries. But no, in Britain, we don't have the same rumour floating around. Because we're so cynical and jaded, because we're British and therefore we crave disappointment. We just expect our leaders to be bent in some respect, like they're crook, they're all like embezzlers or sex offenders, yeah, possibly. So when Jimmy Savile came out and people noticed that with the connections that he had, I think people just got. People have become demoralized more than anything else. It doesn't float around the internet. It's not. There was a massive culture shift in the BBC because obviously Jimmy Savile got away with a lot of stuff, a lot of horrible crimes on BBC property, but it's not quite as loud as it is in America, I think. I don't know. Maybe any British people in the comments, feel free to correct me. But
that's fascinating, and we'll maybe come back to that. But this last question, thank you very much. This one coming from Captain V says, question for all, are they talking about celebs or the everyday person? And if it's everyday, this is regarding our original topic for the debate, said any stats to back up claims that normies are being affected?
It's a bit of a broad question, though. Affected in what way?
Agreed.
Are normies being affected by what? The Me Too movement, backlash from the Me Too movement, the negative side of the Me Too movement. It's a bit. I'm not sure I can answer that intelligently. Well, Stephen, have you noticed something that I've missed?
Yeah, I would just kind of say just kind of echo what Ken said. It unfortunately wasn't kind of specific enough.
I think that maybe if the only way that I can interpret it is that how do normal people use the Me Too movement to get their story out? Because a lot of this stuff happens with celebrities, and they're encouraging other people to speak out, and it's just if it's just you or me, people aren't going to blow it up, and media is not going to blow it up. And I think that that's where it comes into that needs to be that extra step. If celebrities are going to use this movement to do this, or people who have a higher status, then they need to say, if you have this problem, then you should reach out to your local police station, because the only way that you're going to actually get results as a normal person with no real, social media following, you're going to have to go to somebody that's going to be able to help you.
I suppose there is some truth in that only the celebrity stories get noticed, whereas, but Billy Bob Sixpack doesn't get nearly enough press attention. So maybe that's true. I'll agree on that to that extent. But yeah, I'm not sure the Me Too movement does benefit common people as much as it should.
You got it. And with that, we do want to remind you folks, our guests are linked in the description. We want to respect their time as they've already been with us for about 2 hours. We really do appreciate them. So folks, if you haven't checked out their links, why not? You can hear plenty more where all of this came from. And so I want to say huge thank you to Stephen, Kay, Kendon, and Arena. We really do appreciate you.
Thank you so much, James.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry that I fell asleep on Wednesday.
No problem.
If it wasn't you, it would have been me, to be honest.
Also, a little bit of a teaser, folks. Kendon has asked to debate a popular debater that appears on Modern Day Debate. Well, maybe not asked. You had said that people had suggested it to you so many times that you were like, well, I guess maybe I should, if I should. So you guys, believe me, if this one happens, which I think odds are good it will, you don't want to miss it. So a little teaser, I will tell you, the topic might be critical race theory. We don't know for sure, but just want to mention that. I like, it's like the end of the post-credits scene in Marvel where you give a little teaser and Anyway, we'll be right back in a moment with a true post-credit scene where I'll let you know about upcoming debates, folks. Thanks so much, and stick around. I will be back in just a moment. And one last thank you to our guests.